As much as we love the Harry Potter movies, diehard fans will always be upset about some of their favorite moments from the books not making it into the movies. Sometimes they could be just fun or sweet moments, other times some crucial plot points. One location that was actually heavily cut from the movies was the ever-useful Room of Requirement. In this video, we'll take a look at 10 different scenes from the books, or the pages I guess is the correct term, that did not make it into the movie. Dumbledore's Hint. As you are all well aware, the Room of Requirement first appears in the Order of the Phoenix and serves as a safe location where Harry and the rest of Dumbledore's army can practice defense against the dark arts. But just because this is the first time that we see the Room of Requirement in the Harry Potter series doesn't mean it's not the first time it's mentioned, with Rowling setting the groundwork for the magical room in Goblet of Fire. And of course, who else would hint to the Room of Requirement's existence other than the wily wizard with a twinkle in his eye, Albus Dumbledore. In true Dumbledore fashion, he just mentions the existence of the room in passing without going into further detail when he reveals that as he was wandering the Hogwarts halls one night looking for a bathroom, probably after drinking too much pumpkin juice or butterbeer, he stumbled upon a beautiful bathroom which contained a fine selection of chamber pots. Dumbledore then jokes that one day he would like to find that room once more. This story feels fairly innocuous and unimportant by itself, but like so much of Dumbledore's dialogue, it has a much deeper meaning, although this moment did not make it into the movie series. Because I guess Dumbledore discussing his bladder issues doesn't exactly make for great entertainment. Moral of the story is, you can find magical things when you have to go to the bathroom, so stay hydrated. Ravenclaw's Diadem. Talking of Rowling setting the groundwork for later important plot points, Horcruxes and Harry's journey to destroy them is obviously one of the driving forces later on in the series, and we realize that a number of Horcruxes were right in front of our noses the whole time, such as Riddle's diary, Nagini, and of course Harry himself. Another such Horcrux is Ravenclaw's Diadem, which actually shows up unexpectedly in the Room of Requirement in The Half-Blood Prince. In the books, after Harry duels Draco and hits him with a spell, he quickly flees and looks for a place to hide the incriminating potions book belonging to the Half-Blood Prince. He ends up entering the Room of Requirement, where he chances on a bust with a wig and tiara, which turns out to be one of Voldemort's Horcruxes, the Diadem of Ravenclaw. This is of course cut out of the movie, with Harry's duel with Draco taking place in the bathrooms instead of near the Room of Requirement, and Harry doesn't come across the diadem until the Deathly Hallows Part 2. This means the filmmakers also had to change the way Harry finds the diadem, as instead of seeing it before and remembering it, he senses its location. A change which is kind of confusing, but hey, at least he found it, even if it were by his Potter senses tingling. Now that just sounds wrong. The Tunnel Passageway. Speaking of the Deathly Hallows Part 2 and the Room of Requirement, the Room of Requirement acts as a sanctuary for many of the students, such as Neville, who use it as a sanctuary to hide away from the Carrows. But as the students struggle for food, a secret passageway is created, running from the Hog's Head and Hogsmeade to the Room of Requirement, so Aberforth can smuggle in food for the students in hiding. This passageway is then used by Harry, Hermione, and Ron to enter Hogwarts and search for the diadem, and also grants entrance for the Order of the Phoenix, who use it to enter so they can make a stand against Voldemort and the Death Eaters without setting off the caterwauling charm. In the movie though, we don't actually see the Order entering through this passageway and into the Room of Requirement, with their entrance instead being the dramatic scene in the Great Hall. This is undoubtedly a great scene. I mean, who doesn't get chills from the line, "How dare you stand where he stood?" Like seriously. But having the Order's first appearance be coming through the passageway could have been awesome. Dobby's Discovery. Going back to the Room of Requirement's first appearance now. In the movies, after literally walking into Crabbe and Goyle, Neville walks the halls until he stumbles across the Room of Requirement as it reveals its entrance to him. Neville relays this information to Harry and company, and as Hermione basically knows everything, she informs the gang of what the Room of Requirement does, with Ron even making a cheeky reference to Dumbledore's bathroom story. As you know, of course, Harry realizes that this is the perfect location for Dumbledore's army, and it quickly becomes their base, but in the book, it's not actually Neville who finds the room, but instead, everyone's favorite house elf Dobby, unless of course you're weird and your favorite elf is Creature. In the books, Dobby tells Harry about the room's existence after admitting he found the room after using it to hide a drunk Winky, who of course was also cut from the movies, and this of course makes Dobby very happy to help Harry find exactly what he's looking for, and just goes to show that without Dobby, Harry basically would have gotten nowhere. Hashtag the real chosen one. But Dobby finding the Room of Requirement wasn't his only involvement with it. In the Half-Blood Prince, Draco uses the room to repair the vanishing cabinet, which is paired to another in Borgin and Burke's, so he can successfully smuggle Death Eaters onto the Hogwarts grounds so they can assassinate Dumbledore. In the books, Harry is very much aware that Draco is up to no good after noticing he keeps vanishing and sets Dobby the task of keeping tabs on his former master. Although this causes Dobby to feel guilty as he once belonged to the Malfoy family, he dutifully does his mission and tells Harry that Draco has been using the room. Harry quickly puts 2 and 2 together and realizes that this is why Draco cannot be located on the Marauders map. Harry is still clueless as to Draco's plan though, as Dobby also informs him that he cannot follow Draco into the Room of Requirement as he is unclear as to what Malfoy Jr. requests. This of course is all cut from the movies, with Dobby's involvement in the plot often limited. I mean, I guess continually involving a CGI house elf can get a bit costly after all. Last entry on the Dobby train, you may have noticed in Order of the Phoenix that the Room of Requirement is looking extra festive over the Christmas period and during the awkward first kiss between Harry and Cho. As arguably uncomfortable as that scene may be, it may have been more or perhaps actually less uncomfortable if they included the Christmas ornaments Dobby added to the room during the festive season. In the books, Harry hangs ornaments around the room, emblazoned with Harry's face and the words, "Have a very Harry Christmas." Yeah, listen, there's nothing more awkward than kissing your crush for the first time surrounded by Christmas ornaments with your face on them. Trust me, I know. Literally the worst purchase I've ever made. As you are aware, the Room of Requirement is the perfect place to hide things that you want to keep a secret, and Harry and Draco are by no means the only ones who use the room for this purpose. In fact, even the teachers use it to get up to no good. Similar to Winky, Professor Trelawney also uses the Room of Requirement for reasons of inebriation. That's because she is using the room to secretly hide her bottles of sherry. But this does somewhat backfire for Professor Trelawney, as Harry sees her being thrown from the room. It is at this time, though, that she reveals that she heard a student cheering from the room, which of course is much more sinister than it seems, as it suggests that Draco's evil scheme is going well. It's a shame that this scene was cut from the movie, as it would have added a little comic relief, as well as some ominous foreboding. Also, let's face it, Emma Thompson as Professor Trelawney is criminally underutilized. Although I do think that bootlegging probably wasn't what the makers of Hogwarts had in mind when the room was created, but hey, you never know. But there's also another piece of comic relief involving the Room of Requirement in the Half-Blood Prince that was unfortunately cut. During the Half-Blood Prince, Draco becomes very much aware that he cannot keep spending hours at a time in the Room of Requirement without being interrupted or noticed, so he tasks his goons, Crabbe and Goyle, to keep a watch outside. I mean, probably wouldn't be my first choice, but when you have no one else. However, Crabbe and Goyle standing outside the Room of Requirement for hours on end would also cause a great deal of suspicion. So the two took Polyjuice potions so they could disguise themselves. One of the disguises that they opt for is the form of a female first-year student. It's only later that he learns that it was indeed Crabbe and Goyle, and it's a deep shame that this scene was cut from the movie cause, well, let's face it, neither of them would likely have been thrilled with their assignment, and it's always fun to mock Crabbe and Goyle. I mean, I know they're kids, but let's face it, they deserve it. Like any true Gryffindor, one of Ginny's greatest qualities is her bravery. So during the Battle of Hogwarts, she unsurprisingly wants to join in the fight. But also, unsurprisingly, like most mothers would, Molly forbids her from fighting and forces her to wait out in the Room of Requirement. Not sure what the plan was if they lost, but that's a problem for another video. Anyway, in the books, Harry gives Ginny permission to leave, telling her that they need the room to search for the Diadem, all of which, as we mentioned earlier, was changed in the movies. Without a second thought, Ginny leaves and eventually finds herself in between Molly and the detestable Bellatrix Lestrange, and we all know how that ended up. And finally, as we said, just because the room can be turned into something grandiose, it can also turn into something rather common, like a bathroom, or in Fred and George's case, a broom cupboard. The twins actually reveal that they used the room after presumably performing one of their trademark pranks to hide from Filch, with the room turning into a broom cupboard. Seeing as Fred and George know Hogwarts like Hermione knows a textbook, it is unsurprising that they came into contact with the Room of Requirement. But seriously, how did Harry not know about the room beforehand? Because apparently, everyone else knows about it. Anyway, before you go, we have obviously been talking about the Room of Requirement moments that the movies didn't show, but some were added, namely Ginny and Harry's first kiss, which takes place in the Room of Requirement in the movies, but not in the books. Apparently that's just Harry's go-to kissing room.